Hello, welcome back to the Wire Podcast. I am your host, Ryan McCrary, and a couple of episodes ago, I talked about analytics and this database I had created of NBA stats, and I used advanced box score metrics to kind of, make up these metrics that, measure different skill sets like scoring efficiency, passing, defense, rebounding, creation. And I thought it was a cool idea. Well, I wanted to use that to scout players for the NBA draft. So I took a bunch of players, I created a database, and I did the same thing. And I think this is a cool thing, a cool idea. These aren't perfect metrics. I don't claim that they are, but I think this is a cool idea. So I want to talk about it today. Look at these metrics. So I have, in this database, I have one slide that's all positions, one slide for guards, one slide for wings, and one slide for bigs. I have most college players that are draft eligible in this database. I think every player that's on ESPN's draft board is in this database. Then I have a few players from the G League Ignite team. I believe I have one international player. Let me see. I may not. I think I actually took all the international players out because it is difficult to put the international players in this database. It's really easy to clean up the data from Basketball Reference, put it in here. It's a little bit more difficult to do international players. I will at some point do Josh Giddey, put him in here. I don't know what I'll do with the rest. I may get to the international players. It'll just depend on if I have the time to do that. But I do have 3 G League Ignite players: Jalen Green, Jonathan Kuminga, and Deshaun Nix. I hope I said that right. But yeah, so let's go through the metrics. Let's look at guards. So I have 19 guards in this database, and here are the metrics that I have created. So I have size, which is basically just height, weight, wingspan added together. Then I have load, which is offensive load that a player has within their offense. Scoring, passing, defense, rebounding, creation, which is basically scoring and playmaking combined in one metric. Then I have 3-point shooting, perimeter gravity, rim gravity, and total gravity. And total gravity is it's actually just perimeter gravity and rim gravity combined. I also have athleticism. Now, this is not a perfect measure of athleticism. It's just a couple of metrics it's basically just an estimate of athleticism using like rebounding, steals, blocks, free throw rate, stuff like that. And then I also have like impact metrics like offensive impact, defensive impact, total impact, and offensive plus defensive impact. So it's pretty cool. Now, let's look at and then I also have some other metrics that don't have to do with that, like assist rate divided by usage rate, assist rate divided by turnover rate, per 40 minutes assist divided by per 40 turnovers, and then I have some other metrics that I'm not going to get into today. But let's look at size for point guards, or for guards. So number 1 in size is Cade Cunningham, I believe. Yeah, it's Cade Cunningham. And if you don't count Cade Cunningham as a guard, it's David Johnson. Then we have like Deshaun Nix, Jalen Suggs, Davion Mitchell, Jaden Springer. Makes sense. And then at the bottom you got like Sharif Cooper's last in size, along with DJ Stewart and Xavier Pinson. I think that makes sense. Then we go to load, and you look at the top guy in this metric is, let me move over, Sharif Cooper. Then you got Ayo Dosunmu. I hope I said that right. And then Cade Cunningham, Marcus Carr. Makes sense. And then when you look at the bottom, you got Deshaun Nix, Marcus Garrett, and Davion Mitchell, along with Jaden Springer. Scoring. Number 1 is a little bit surprising, I'd say, or at least in my opinion. It's Sharif Cooper. Then we got Cade Cunningham and Ayo Dosunmu. So the reason why Cooper is up here in scoring is because he attempted a lot of shots this year. I think he shot like 18. Let me see. He attempted 18.5 field goal attempts per 40 minutes this season, and he also attempted 10.4 free throws per 40 minutes. So he shot the ball a ton this year. That's why he's up there. He wasn't super efficient, but he scored 24.4 points per 40 minutes. He had a super high free throw rate. And that's why. And he also led the class, or led the guards in load. That's why he's up here in scoring. But Cade Cunningham being up here makes sense. So does Ayo Dosunmu. Then we got Marcus Garrett, Daishen Nix, and Davion Mitchell at the bottom. I think that makes sense. Looking at passing, number one it's Sharife Cooper by a mile. Now this passing metric isn't perfect because Cade Cunningham is towards the bottom. And yeah, Cade Cunningham's passing metrics aren't great. But I think he is a better passer than the metrics, or than the statistics show. But Sharife Cooper is number one by a mile. That makes sense. I think he's the best passer in the class. Then you got Marcus Carr, McKinley Wright in the fourth, Miles McBride. Makes sense. And at the bottom we got David Johnson, DJ Stewart, Cade Cunningham, and Marcus Garrett. Then we got defense is next. Number one in this metric is, I believe it's Cade Cunningham. Yeah, it's Cade Cunningham, followed by Jalen Suggs, Jared Butler, and Jared Springer. At the bottom, we got Tyson Etienne, Marcus Zagorowski, I hope I said that right, and Carlik Jones. I think that makes sense. Sharife Cooper, I thought would be towards the bottom. He is, but he's not as far down as I thought he would be. He's 14th. But I think it makes sense. The guys at the top are all very good defenders, so that makes sense. We also got fifth is Miles McBride, sixth is Davion Mitchell, so I like that. Then we have rebounding. I don't really care about that, but number one is Cade Cunningham, followed by David Johnson, then Jalen Suggs, and at the bottom we got Sharife Cooper, DJ Stewart. Next we have creation. Now this is interesting. I think this is one of the more intriguing stats, or metrics. And like I said earlier, it combines scoring and playmaking. So if you're a great scorer and you're a great playmaker, you're gonna rank highly in this metric. Number one is Sharife Cooper. Number two is Cade Cunningham. Number three is Ayo Dosunmu. Number four is Xavier Pinson. And number five is Marcus Carr. At the bottom, we got Marcus Garrett, Daishen Nix, and David Johnson. And we also got Davion Mitchell at 16. With this metric, it takes a lot into account. Like how many it takes into account load, field goal attempts, plus free throw attempts. It also takes into account, passing, assist rate and turnover rate. And it also takes into account, age. So I want guys who are young to also rank highly in this metric. So I like that. That's one reason why Cade Cunningham is up here and Sharife Cooper. But I like that metric a lot. Then we have, 3-point shooting. Really interesting what you'll see here. Number one is Tyson Etienne out of Wichita State. Then we got Jared Butler, Marcus Zagorowski, and then Cade Cunningham. At the bottom, we have Daishen Nix, Marcus Garrett, Carlik Jones, and McKinley Wright in the fourth. Something interesting, Sharife Cooper ranks higher in 3-point shooting than Jaden Springer. And that's interesting because Jaden Springer was more accurate from three this season than Sharife Cooper, but he ranks lower. And the main reason why is because Sharife Cooper, I believe he was more accurate from the free throw line, and he shot more, he had a higher volume of 3-point attempts than Jaden Springer. Then we get perimeter gravity. Let's just look at total gravity. Let's look at perimeter gravity. I think it's important to look at these on their own. Number one in perimeter gravity is Sharife Cooper. Number two, Marcus Carr. Number three, Tyson Etienne. Number four, Jared Butler. Then at the bottom, 19, Marcus Garrett. 18, Jaden Springer. 17, Daishen Nix. And 16, David Johnson. Then when we look at rim gravity, let me sort that. Number 1 is, I think it's Cade. No, it's McKinley Wright, number 1, then Cade Cunningham, number 2, then Miles McBride, number 3, then Marcus Carr, number 4, then we got number 19, DJ Stewart, number 18, Xavier Pinson, 17, Tyson Etienne, and 16, Marcus Zagorowski. This takes into account 2-point attempts, free throw attempts per 40, then free throw rate, along with assist rate and turnover rate. I think it also takes into account size, so height and wingspan. And then total gravity, let's look at that. Total gravity, number 1 is Sharif Cooper, number 2, Marcus Carr, number 3, Jared Butler, and number 4, Tyson Etienne. Number 19, Marcus Garrett, number 18, Jaden Springer, number 17, Daishan Nix, and number 16, David Johnson. And that's it. And then we can look at athleticism too, or estimated athleticism. Number 1 is Jalen Suggs. Number 2 is Cade Cunningham. Number 3 is Daishan Nix. And number 4 is Trey Mann. Then we look at the bottom. Number 19 is Tyson Etienne. Number 18, Marcus Zagorowski. Number 17, Xavier Pinson. And number 16, Davion Mitchell. I don't like the Mitchell placement there because he's a good athlete. So like I said, these metrics aren't perfect. But the reason I did this is because I think it's interesting to look at players this way. I just want to look at the draft in a different way. I just want to see if I can look at the draft in a more intelligent way. And I think this does that. So yeah, that's guards there. Some interesting placement there with some of the metrics, like Davion Mitchell not ranking highly in estimated athleticism. Then you got Jaden Springer ranking lower in three-point shooting than Sharif Cooper. That's interesting. And Sharif Cooper ranks highly in a lot of these metrics. Do I think he's the best guard in the class? Maybe, depending on like Cade Cunningham is a better player than Sharif Cooper. But is Sharif Cooper a better point guard? Maybe. But I would not say that Cade Cunningham or that Sharif Cooper is a better point guard or is a better player than Cade Cunningham. Cade Cunningham is the best player in the class. So the metrics aren't perfect, but they're solid. I think if you put Cade Cunningham with the wings, he would rank highly in some of those metrics. That'll be interesting. I'll actually do that at some point, not today for this podcast. Let's look at wings. There are a ton of wings in this class, 39 to be exact, or 39 in my database. Let's look at size. So, number 1 in size is Matt Mitchell. Then we got Scotty Barnes, Jalen Johnson, then Franz Wagner. Then at the bottom, we got Nah'Shon Hyland, and then Justin Champagne, Joel Ayayi, and Jalen Green. And then let's go to the next metric. We got load, I believe. Yep, load. Let's see who had the largest offensive load. Number 1 is Cameron Thomas, Nah'Shon Hyland, then David Duke, and James Bouknight. Then at the bottom, we got Scotty Lewis, then Josiah Jordan James, and then Benedict Mathurin, and Joel Ayayi. Then we have scoring, I believe. We have scoring. Number 1 is, let's look, Cameron Thomas. Then we got Nah'Shon Hyland, then James Bouknight, then Justin Champagne. At the bottom, we got Scotty Lewis, Josiah Jordan James, Joel Ayayi, and Trey Murphy III. Then moving on to the next metric, which I believe is passing. Yes, it is. Number 1 in passing is Paul Scruggs, then David Duke, then Austin Reeves, then Scotty Barnes, then Aaron Henry. Let's look at, we also got Franz Wagner. I know I went a little bit deeper than I have been with other metrics. Kind of interesting to see Aaron Henry up there. Don't think of him as like an elite passer. I like to see Scotty Barnes up there. That's cool. Young player. Probably going to be a top 10 pick. Or at least a lottery pick. Then at the bottom we got Scotty Lewis, and then Zaire Williams, then Kessler Edwards, then Marcus Bagley. James Bouknight is also at the bottom. That's interesting. I know he's a guy that I don't know if he's going to be a lottery pick, but I know a lot of people like him. I haven't seen him yet. I haven't watched him, but that's cool. Then defense. Number one in defense is, by a mile, Jalen Johnson. Then we got Scotty Lewis. Then we got Herbert Jones. Then Josiah Jordan-James. Scotty Barnes is up there at 5th, along with Aaron Henry, or along with Aaron Henry at 6th. Then at the bottom we got Derek Austin Jr., Sam Hauser, Tavion Kinsey, and Austin Reeves. Let's move on to the next metric, and that is rebounding. Number one is, I don't know who number one is. Number one is Matt Mitchell. Then we got Jalen Johnson. Then Scotty Barnes. Then Sam Hauser. Franz Wagner and Marcus Bagley also make an appearance in the top 6. At the bottom, we got Deshaun Highland, Jalen Green, Keon Johnson, and Brandon Boston Jr. And then moving on, we got creation. Let's see who the best creators are in the class. Number one, this is by a mile, Cameron Thomas, then Deshaun Highland, then James Bouknight, then Jalen Johnson. That's interesting. At the bottom, we got Josiah Jordan-James, then Scotty Lewis, then Joel Ayayi, then Trey Murphy III. So that's interesting to see Jalen Johnson that high. I haven't seen him play, so it'll be interesting to watch him, see if that's right. Then three-point shooting. Number one is Quentin Grimes. I didn't think he was that good of a three-point shooter. That might be a mistake. Let's look. Okay, so he attempted 10.1 3-pointers per 40 minutes. Did he really? Let me look. That might be a mistake in my database. Let me look. Quentin Grimes stats. Because I don't remember him being as good of a three-point shooter this year. No, he was. Okay, wow. That's not a mistake. Okay, I thought it was. I remember looking at his numbers during the season. I made a video about Houston going into the tournament. I didn't realize he was that good of a three-point shooter in college. So he attempted 10.1 threes per 40 minutes. He shot 40.3% from 3, and 78.8% from the three-point line. So he's number one. Then we got Corey Kispert, Deshaun Highland, and Sam Hauser. And at the bottom, we got Scotty Barnes, Keon Johnson, and Herbert Jones, along with Scotty Lewis. That makes sense. Okay. And then moving on to perimeter gravity. Number one is Quentin Grimes, followed by Deshaun Highland, then Cameron Thomas, then Corey Kispert. At the bottom, we got Scotty Lewis, Jalen Johnson, Herbert Jones, and Keon Johnson. And then moving on to rim gravity, that is number one is, let's see, Scotty Barnes, then Matt Mitchell, then Franz Wagner, then Sam Hauser. Jalen Johnson also makes an appearance in the top 5. At the bottom, we have Deshaun Highland, then Jalen Green, then John Petty Jr., then Scotty Lewis. And then we got total gravity. Let's look at that. Actually, hold on. I just sorted the wrong thing. Total gravity. Number one is Quentin Grimes, followed by Deshaun Highland, then Cameron Thomas, then Corey Kispert. At the bottom, we got Scotty Lewis, Keon Johnson, Jalen Johnson, and Herbert Jones. Then we have athleticism, or estimated athleticism. Number one is, I think someone that we haven't talked about yet is up there. Number one is Jalen Johnson. Number two is Justin Champagne. Number three is Josiah Jordan-James. And number 4 is Herbert Jones. Franz Wagner also makes an appearance up here. And then at the bottom, we got MJ Walker, Cameron Thomas, DJ Stewart Jr., and Derek Austin Jr. So that's the wings for those metrics. I was kind of surprised, as you can tell, that Quentin Grimes was up there in three-point shooting. But as you can see, other names that were up there a lot in some metrics were like Jalen Johnson, Scotty Barnes, Franz Wagner. And I have not seen any of those players, so I'm really excited to watch these guys. I'm late to the party this year in terms of my scouting work. Right now I'm watching the guards. I've watched a few of them. I've watched like Kate Cunningham. I've watched Reeve Cooper, Trey Mann. I'm starting to watch Jalen Suggs now. So I'm going through the guards, and then I'll get through the wings and the bigs. Speaking of bigs, let's move on and talk about them. Let's look at size. So number one in size is Day'Ron Sharpe, followed by Luka Garza, then Raekwon Gray and Neemias Queta. At the bottom, we have Greg Brown, JT Thor, Isaiah Jackson, and Jonathan Kuminga. Then we have load. The leaders in offensive load for bigs, number one is Santi Aldama, I don't know how to say that, I'm sorry I mispronounced that. Then Sandro, okay, let's get through this. Sandro Mamukelashvili, I know I screwed that up. He's a big man from Seton Hall. Then Luka Garza and Trace Jackson Davis. At the bottom, we have Kai Jones, Isaiah Jackson, Yves Pons, is it Yves Pons or Vase Pons? I'm going to say Vase Pons and JT Thor. And then we have defense. Number one in defense, according to this metric, is Isaiah Jackson, followed by Neemias Queta, then Charles Bassey and Jay Huff. Evan Mobley also makes an appearance in the top 5. At the bottom, we got Isaiah Livers, Matthew Hurt, Sandro from Seton Hall. I'm not going to say his last name. I don't want to keep screwing that up. Then Makur Maker. I do want to say Makur Maker has a small sample size. He played 2 games this year, I believe. Was that right? Yeah, he played 2 games. And then, so I'm going to say next up besides him is Jeremiah Robinson Earl. Moving on to the next metric, we got rebounding. Now, this is important for bigs. Number one is Day'Ron Sharpe, followed by Luka Garza, Raekwon Gray, and Neemias Queta. Now, this metric takes into account total rebounds per 40 minutes, total rebound rate, and size, so like height, weight, wingspan, stuff like that. And at the bottom, we got JT Thor, Jonathan Kuminga, Vase Pons, and Greg Brown, along with like Isaiah Jackson and Kai Jones and Evan Mobley. I wonder why Evan Mobley ranks low. Is he really just not a great rebounder? I thought he was. He might not be. He might just not be a good rebounder. Let's look at total rebound rate real quick. See where Evan Mobley ranks. So, number one, so we got like Charles Bassey, number 1, Day'Ron Sharpe. Evan Mobley is 12th in total rebound rate. So it makes sense why he's lower. He also doesn't weigh a ton. He's 7 feet tall, weighs 215 pounds. So I guess that's why he's lower here. Let's move on to creation. And number 1 in this metric for bigs is, by a mile, is Luka Garza, followed by Santi Aldama, Trace Jackson Davis, and Charles Bassey. Makur Maker also makes an appearance in the top 5. Then at the bottom, we got Vase Pons, followed by Kai Jones, Isaiah Livers, and Isaiah Jackson. JT Thor's also in the bottom 5. And then we got 3-point shooting. This will be interesting to see. Number 1 is, let me look, Isaiah Livers, followed by Matthew Hurt, Greg Brown, Santi Aldama. Now, Greg Brown, that's interesting. I don't think he's a great shooter, or that's like, I think, public perception. Maybe I'm wrong. I haven't seen him, so I might just be completely wrong here. But he shot 33% from 3 in college on 6.8 attempts. Also shot 70.8% from the free throw line. Okay, so it makes sense why he's projecting, or why this metric is projecting him to be a good shooter. He was not terrible in college, and he shot decently well from the free throw line. Then at the bottom, we got Isaiah Jackson, Neemias Queta, Day'Ron Sharpe, and Makur Maker. Just to be clear, Maker is He does suffer from small sample size. Only played 2 games in college. So after him, we got Trace Jackson Davis at the bottom in 3-point shooting. Now let's move on to perimeter gravity, and let me sort it. Number 1 is Isaiah Livers, followed by Matthew Hurt, then Sandro M. from Seton Hall, and Santi Aldama. At the bottom, we got Isaiah Jackson, Trace Jackson Davis, Kai Jones, and Neemias Queta. Then moving on to rim gravity, we have number 1 is, let's sort it. Number 1 is Day'Ron Sharpe, followed by Luka Garza, Raekwon Gray, Makur Maker, Neemias Queta, and Trace Jackson Davis. At the bottom, we got Greg Brown, JT Thor, Isaiah Jackson, and Base Pons. Jonathan Kuminga is also towards the bottom. And then we have total gravity. And number 1 is, let's see. Number 1 is Isaiah Livers. Number 2, Matthew Hurt. Number 3, Sandro M. from Seton Hall. And number 4, Luka Garza. At the bottom, we have Isaiah Jackson, Trace Jackson Davis, Kai Jones, and Neemias Queta. We also got athleticism. So let's look at that, sort that. And we got number 1 is Charles Bassey, Isaiah Jackson, Neemias Queta, Day'Ron Sharpe, Jay Huff and Evan Mobley also make an appearance up here. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the positions, going through the metrics by position. Pretty interesting to see Luka Garza ranked really high in a bunch of metrics. He did have a great season this year, so it'll be interesting to watch him. A lot of young guys ranked towards the bottom in some of these metrics, like JT Thor, Jonathan Kuminga. Evan Mobley ranks lower in these metrics than I expected. Does that mean he's a bad player? No, it does not whatsoever. He's a freaking beast. So these metrics don't mean that he's a bad player. So like I said earlier, they aren't perfect. So don't take these for gospel. But it is interesting to see what these players look like using this method, looking at metrics in this way, and basically just using the box score to kind of quantify these individual skill sets. I think it's a pretty cool way to look at players. And let's look at some of these metrics will be skewed because I have them sorted on one page by all positions. Some of them will be skewered based on position. So let's look at 3-point shooting. I think that's fun to look at because if you look at creation, you're going to get a lot of guards, and you're going to get a lot of wings. So let's look at 3-point shooting. Some of the best 3-point shooters in the class, according to this metric, we got Quentin Grimes, Corey Kispert, Nahshon Hyland, Sam Hauser, and Tyson Etienne. At the bottom, we got Isaiah Jackson, Neemias Queta, Day'Ron Sharpe, and Makur Maker. Let's look at passing, because I think that'll be interesting to look at. Passing. So the best passers in the whole draft are in my database. We got number 1 Sharif Cooper, then Marcus Carr, then McKinley Wright, the 4th, then Miles McBride. Ayo Dosunmu is also up there. At the bottom, we got Greg Brown, Charles Bassey, Isaiah Jackson, Kai Jones, and JT Thor. And let's look. Is there anything else we want to look at? We can look at load. I think that'll be cool to look at. Let's look at load. So number 1 is Sharif Cooper, then Cameron Thomas, then Santi Aldama, then Ayo Dosunmu, followed by Cade Cunningham at 5. At the bottom, we got Kai Jones, Isaiah Jackson, Scotty Lewis, and Vase Pons. And let's look at creation. I think that'll be interesting to look at. Let's go to creation, and number 1, and then we'll look at defense. To close out the pod, we'll look at defense. Number 1 in creation is Luka Garza, followed by Cameron Thomas, Sharif Cooper, Nahshon Hyland, and Santi Aldama. And then at the bottom, was there anyone else interesting? We also got James Bouknight and Cade Cunningham in the top 7. At the bottom, you got Vase Pons, Josiah Jordan-James, Scotty Lewis, and Marcus Garrett. And then to close out the pod, let's look at defense. Who are the best defenders in the draft this year? Number one is, let's look. Number one is Isaiah Jackson, followed by Neemias Queta, Charles Bassey, Jay Huff, and Evan Mobley, Jalen Johnson. Okay, there's a lot of young players at the top, so I'm going to run through a bunch of names. Number 4, Jay Huff. 5, Evan Mobley. 6, Jalen Johnson. 7, JT Thor. 8, Scotty Lewis. 9, Dayron Sharp. And then 10, Moses Wright. We also got Vase Pons and Herbert Jones up there. At the bottom, we got Derek Austin Jr., Tyson Etienne, Sam Hauser, and Tavion Kinsey. So, that's it for this podcast. That's a look at individual skill sets measured by using box score metrics, using both per 40-minute stats and advanced metrics. So yeah, that's all I have for today. I hope y'all enjoyed this. I hope y'all were educated by this. I hope this shows you, or I hope y'all feel informed by this. Because I think this is, like I've said before, I think this is an interesting way to look at players. And like I said, it's not perfect, but I think it's interesting. So yeah, that's all I have for y'all today. I hope y'all enjoyed this episode of the podcast. If you want to see more content from me, you can see our I do have a website at it's thewiresports.com. I also have a YouTube channel called The Wire, and you can find that on my Twitter profile at the Ryan McCrary. That's the Ryan RYAN McCrary MCCRARY. That is also my Instagram handle. You can find those links in the link of my Instagram pages or my social media pages. So yeah, I hope y'all enjoyed that, and I will see y'all next time. God bless.